Welcome, everybody. Dr. LeGrand here. We are going to be talking about the 5 ADHD medication alternatives that actually do work. This is something I've been using with my patients and clients and that we'll be implementing. So let's go in and dive right in, and then we'll go into Q&A questions at the end of the live stream, as always. But let's dive in right now. Going to switch over to the whiteboard. And if for some reason the sound cuts out again, let me know, and we'll dive into that. So the very first thing when it comes to ADHD, and the different alternatives that you can use that actually do work is the one that I find that's most important is definitely looking at digestive support. And because when it comes to our digestive system, it's the first thing that, whenever we eat food, it's the first place it goes to. And if we're not consuming our foods properly, guess what? It doesn't feed the body, it doesn't feed the brain, and therefore it can make ADHD symptoms worse. Also, on top of that, our digestive tract, it also derives most of the neurotransmitters in our digestive tract is where it mostly derives, even more so than the brain. So that's also important when it comes to neurotransmitters when we're thinking about that. So very first thing when it comes to the digestive system is looking at, of course, things such as like the pancreas and also the stomach and also the digestive lining, okay? So when we're talking about the pancreas, it helps break down our macronutrients. So our proteins, fats, and carbs, all of those things are going to be important for breaking down. And what I usually suggest to people is something like a pancreatic enzyme. Now, of course, I've already drawn over this previously, but thank you guys for waiting with the sound cutting out. So pancreatic enzymes is also really something, it's going to be something important to be implementing. On top of that, when we also look at the digestive stomach acid within the stomach, that's also important to look at too. Because if we're not breaking down our foods properly enough and our stomach acid is low and it's not actually helping break down the foods, it can cause digestive upsetness. It also won't break down our foods, which then also won't feed our brain, which can cause issues for our ADHD symptoms to be even worse. So what we have to look at is, okay, maybe this is a possibility where we need to add something like betaine HCl that helps break down the foods even further and helps with the stomach acid as well. Now, again, with all of this stuff, you always have to check with your doctor first to see if this is something that you should be implementing. Now, on top of that, it really makes sense that most of the things that I do recommend here is something that I always recommend a lot of my patients and clients with ADHD, but not everybody. It just really kind of depends. But I'm just trying to share with you guys what I have seen most common of things that I usually do prescribe to people. Now, the other thing is also looking at is probiotics. So probiotics is really big because usually with people with ADHD tend to have really bad digestive issues, but also they need digestive support through probiotics because, again, our gut flora can be out of balance, and it goes back to the neurotransmitters. And so if those neurotransmitters are really off, we also have to look at the digestive system, since a lot of our neurotransmitters also derive and are created through our digestive tract. And so a probiotic can help balance those. And then on top of that, if you've had a history of antibiotics, especially in the last 2 years, then usually that really depletes a lot of the good gut flora, and you need to replenish that with probiotics. The next thing is looking at liver support. So the liver is really important because with the liver is the ultimate detoxifying machine. So when it comes to the ultimate detoxifying machine, guess what? As we get older into adulthood, it gets taxed over the years more and more, and therefore it ends up not working optimally. And if it's not working optimally, then guess what? It's going to impact our brain. We're going to have symptoms of brain fog, fatigue, usually sometimes even focus and attention issues can also lead into that. So we definitely want to make sure that we're supporting the liver. And with the liver, usually when it comes to liver support, these are things that are going to be things like such as, dandelion root, a lot of different bitter herbs that I usually recommend. Milk thistle is also a good one. And then also, even if you like liver, if you get a good, source of liver, straight up liver is also great for impacting the liver. But also even things such as like sour, so like lemon, lime, grapefruit, 100% cranberry juice, things that are also sour or bitter are also going to stimulate the liver and gallbladder and are also going to be really beneficial. So now the next thing, actually before we go there, let me just see if there was any, just to check if everyone can still hear me, right? Put that in the chat. You can still hear me. The sound's still good, right? Let's see here. We got a lot of people here. Judy, Luke, Pam, Kevin, Tatum. Hey, Welcome all you guys. Since one of the kids have been in... Oh, Pam's asking, like, sometimes kids will come in the background. It's usually my daughter, Ellie. She always likes to come say hi. Any books you recommend? So I'll get to questions at the end. I just want to make sure you guys can still all hear me. Okay, good. But yeah, please type in your questions. I'll make sure to get the questions at the end of the training. So the next thing that's number 2, now these aren't in particular order, but the second one for using for alternative ways for treating ADHD that I've found that has been beneficial is looking at hormones. So balancing your hormones. Now, hormones really do impact the brain significantly. And if there is out of balances going on here, guess what? It can lead into, definitely being unfocused. It also can really impact how we feel, our mood. So definitely being more hypersensitive. Also at the same time, it can also impact our energy levels, high or low, and also could feel us more anxious, more depressed. So a lot that can impact on us, which can make our ADHD symptoms worse. And if these have never been looked at for you guys, guess what? Maybe it is more of a hormone issue than per se the ADHD. Not saying you don't have ADHD, but it can be more of a hormone issue when you're having your ADHD symptoms getting worse and worse. But then doctors just only look at it as an ADHD situation and never look at the other tests. So if you've never had these tests and you have a lot of these different symptoms, I definitely highly recommend. So the very first one is looking at thyroid. So the thyroid definitely impacts us a lot when it comes to our energy. But a lot of people think it's just energy, but it also does impact, the way we focus and the way we also our emotions. Even if you have issues with, weight, that could also be an issue with thyroid. And so you want to make sure that you're checking your thyroid and checking all the different tests, not just TSH, but also free T3 and free T4. Those are going to be also important when it comes to testing for thyroid. Now, if you do have hypothyroid, it's also looking at being prescribed not just the standard medication of levothyroxine. Now, sometimes those are the only options that will work the best. It really just depends. I work with also a lot of thyroid patients. But things that I mentioned here was Nature-Throid and MP-Thyroid. Those types of medications are the closest to its natural source of actual thyroid desiccation. Okay, so that's something to kind of look at. Now, next thing is also looking at your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA levels. Now, those can also really impact when it comes to our mood, our energy, our focus. It really all can impact it if those are out of balance. Now, you probably haven't heard of is DHEA. DHEA is a precursor to testosterone and also estrogen. So if your DHEA levels are low and also your testosterone and estrogen levels are fine, well, guess what? It can end up being depleted over the years if we don't address the DHEA levels, and which can impact your hormones. Now, the other one here is the adrenals, for adrenal support. Now, adrenals are right here. They sit right above our kidneys and has a lot to do with different hormones such as cortisol, as well as managing norepinephrine, epinephrine. But cortisol has a huge impact when it comes to our energy and also focus. So if it's low in the morning, if you're really groggy in the morning, guess what? Your cortisol levels are probably really low, and that's why you're having a hard time really focusing and having energy in the morning, and you might need some adrenal support. Or it could be too high at night and it keeps you up at night. So you could have this up and down dysregulation of cortisol levels, and that's why you need to help with adrenal support. And things like this could be like taking things like ashwagandha, even echinacea root can really help it. But where I find it's really beneficial is taking something like adrenal desiccated, because there'll power and more nutrients to the adrenals that can make a difference from night to day. For a lot of people that I work with ADHD, if we see that their adrenals are off, we start implementing that. Sometimes that makes all the difference for them. Okay, but it really just depends. Again, you got to run testing to see if this is something that you need to be implementing. So then the next thing is looking at is neurofeedback. Now, a lot of you probably have heard about neurofeedback. Now, with this one, I will say it really depends. I don't think it's a home run every time for people with ADHD. I think it's 50-50 from my experience, where 50% of the time, it works for people, 50% of the time it doesn't. It just really depends, because it's really expensive. If you go to a neurofeedback clinic, it can be anywhere from $150 to even up to $200 a session. And usually they recommend at least, 1 to 2 sessions a week to get a result. So there's also remote neurofeedback, and there's more technology that's starting to come up with things like that where it can bring the prices down. It's just usually the software that's so expensive. So if you've never heard about neurofeedback, especially for ADHD, let me explain a bit of what it is and why it works. So using neurofeedback is something where you start give me a second, is usually you're hooked up, right, on, different parts of the head to measure brainwave activity, okay? And so usually you're watching something, and it's usually a game or something that you're not actually doing anything with your hands, you're just watching it. And then based off of the feedback, so the brain sends feedback of what you're watching and looking at brainwave activity to see if you're paying attention, if you're focusing, and then it will go back to the screen to adjust it. So like, for example, if you're not paying attention, a feedback will show that you're losing in the game, or the screen goes more dark. And then it gives a feedback to the brain like, hey, you're not paying attention, so it readjusts. So it's like exercise for the brain. It's adjusting it to help you be more focused, helps you with attention, helps even with anxiety, also with sleep issues. Neurofeedback has a lot of benefits. There's a lot of research out there. But again, it isn't a home run for everybody with ADHD, and that's why I set that preface at the beginning. But I have seen it work for people with ADHD to make a big difference, but I've also seen it not work for people with ADHD. So it just really depends. So I would say that's one out of the 5 that I'm talking about today that I haven't, seen, a higher percentage, but I still think it's very valuable. The conventional medical world seems to be embracing it more because they're seeing more research on it and seeing a lot more benefits from it. So something to keep in mind. The next one is ADHD coaching. So maybe some of you guys have experienced some ADHD coaching, maybe not, have good or bad experiences. Why I think this is important, something that I've had to rely all my life, is finding a mentor or coach. And I still have coaches in my life and mentors in my life to hold me accountable. And I think that's the biggest one, is having someone just holding you accountable so that you go achieve your goals and giving you structure. So that's another thing, is creating structure for you in your life. And that's something that I have found a big difference in why I transitioned from my physical practice to doing more of a program so I can actually coach people on a weekly basis. And I've seen the biggest difference there because of the accountability. But also on top of that is really a lot of the executive functioning issues that we deal with, time management, planning, just organizing and structure, and giving you strategies to be able to implement can make all the difference for your ADHD. Also, when it comes to emotions, understanding more of the nuances with ADHD and understanding the situation to giving strategies and tips that can help you with that. And then, of course, learning supportive skills. So your day-to-day stuff, whether it comes to relationships, things at school, things at work, all these things that we deal on a daily basis, giving more ADHD-friendly strategies versus just neurotypical strategies to be implemented. But ADHD coaching, I would say, makes a big difference that doesn't necessarily require taking medications, okay? Now, the last one here, and if you guys have been following me for a while, have probably heard me talk about this. But this, for sure, I would say, makes a huge difference when it comes to using natural sources for ADHD as treatment versus using medications. And this is where we do testing, right? So we talked about hormones and also digestion, running those tests, but also looking at your brain chemistry. So looking at the specific neurotransmitters and balancing those out with using things like amino acids and other types of supplements and nutrients to balance those out. And so really it comes down to, a lot of people address, yes, dopamine, especially with medications. It's usually dopamine and norepinephrine. Those are the only two that they really address with all different types of stimulant ADHD medications. But there are so many other different neurotransmitters and amino acids that have to be addressed that build all these other ones. So what this means is that you test this and you see, okay, do I need phenylalanine? Do I need tyrosine? Do I need to improve my dopamine levels? Do I need to improve epinephrine or norepinephrine? Or it could be also serotonin. Is my serotonin levels low? Is it L-tryptophan, 5-HTP, melatonin? All those can be impactful and have a lot of similar symptoms, whether they're high or low. And that's what makes it difficult for people. If you don't run any testing, all of these, a lot of these neurotransmitters that are high or low can present with the same type of symptoms. So you can't say, oh, because I'm depressed or I can't focus or pay attention, it's definitely dopamine. No, well, it could be any of these other neurotransmitters because they also present with a lot of the same symptoms as low dopamine or high. So you have to realize that to get a good picture and to make natural medicine work, especially if you want to use supplements and amino acids and stuff like that, you got to run some testing to see, okay, which ones are out of balance. And something that we do in my program and what I do with my clients and patients, and that's where we get significant results from that. So sorry about the sound going off. I hope everything worked out now, but I wanted to kind of address some other things. So if you are struggling and really are looking for ways to be able to help with your ADHD, I do have a free training in the description below that you can check out that goes over more in detail my proprietary process of how I do help people with ADHD. And then if you watch the training and at the end of the training video, it will invite you to book a free call with me that we could jump on the phone to see if we'd be a good fit for your health needs for your ADHD. So like I said, that's in the description below. And thank you guys for attending. This is Dr. LeGrand signing out. Thanks. Bye.